humans, and there are
Yeah.
basic human natures, and you seem to have a natural sense, a sense of communication. So,
Yeah.
if someone comes and they're frustrated, what do you not want to say, right? I don't want to put it on you. I'm not going to blame you. I'm going to validate your feelings.
Yes.
I'm going to remind you that I'm here to help you.
Yeah.
Like, what are
Yeah.
you going to
Yeah.
do?
It's a lot of
And
the mirror. It's a lot of the mirroring technique, right? Oh yeah, I can see how that would be a problem, right? You got 500 students, and you're not able to add a grade for them all, right? And you only have tonight to do your grades. Like that sucks. So let's figure this out. It's a lot of mirroring.
right, validating, mirroring technique. These are these kinds of basics around, I think, tech troubleshooting, that the human element of tech troubleshooting, where you get so many people who get an email from IT, and you submit a ticket and something's not working, and then you get an email and you don't feel like it's addressing it. Feels
Yeah.
very robotic. You're
Yeah.
providing this very human experience, and you've mentioned it from the very beginning. When you were a software engineer student at Sheffield, you were interested in the user experience of technology. So how is it working for you? How is it not working for you? Even if the technology is not meant to be used that way, like,
Yeah.
what are all the different potential ways AI could be used by a professor, as opposed to this one or two set of ways that everyone is so scared of? How
Yeah.
could it be used to reduce workload,
Yeah.
make something more efficient, improve access?
Yeah.
And do you feel that that is something that makes you unique, and like that, because that communication style or working, is that something that you believe is just part of who you are, or something that was a learned behavior through working with faculty members and seeing these kinds of repeated experiences?
I think I've always been somewhat approachable, just in nature. And I think maybe to a fault, I'm quite transparent, and I think I'm just real, right? And so I also have no problem with saying, I don't know how to help you with this right now, but let me take it away and see if there's a better workflow that's going to work for you. And that lets people know that, it's not them using the technology, right? There's there's different ways to achieve things, and often I think technology sometimes what's the word I'm looking for, like configures us a little bit, right? Because there's a next and a next and a next, and in some ways that's really helpful because it gives you that path to follow, but sometimes it restricts you from thinking about using things in other ways, right? And so there's been many occasions where we're trying to do this, and I'm like, the software doesn't let you do that. But wait, let me think about that, and then we'll find a way to do it, right? And that may not always be the case. There may not always be a solution, but I'm
This is
always willing to try.
Yeah, and this is the human element. Like, I always talk about, whether we're talking about generative AI or any other piece of technology that came before it, I always emphasize the human component, that humans are essential in the way the world works, that
Yeah.
these are things that have come out. It's not, we can't we can't unmake cities or
No.
discover the atom splits. We can't unmake generative AI now. So
Yeah.
these things have happened. And now it's a human discussion around how we support these things, how we integrate these
Yes.
things, how we leverage them, what kind of policies or procedures we put in
Yeah.
place around them to keep us safe, like nuclear energy.
Yeah.
The same kinds of approaches we have are present in the technology that we use in education, but humans are at the center of it. And even when
Yeah.
we look at artificial intelligence, people are learning more and more about the human component of training AI.
Yeah.
All the different ways that humans are involved in that
Yeah.
process.
Yeah.
And
And
yeah,
if I think of, it's interesting. I think there's this emotional intelligence piece that needs to go hand in hand with supporting people. And I mean, there is a place for live chat. We use live chat. It's a real person behind it. But, I've interacted with automated live chat, and sometimes that frustrates me more, right? Because sometimes you just need someone to be like, oh, yeah, that I can't believe you deleted that. Like, hold on, let me see if I can fix that for you, right? And I don't know that you would get that same empathy and interaction. And who knows where AI is going, right? It's going crazy places. But sometimes you just in that moment, you don't need somebody to say, you did it wrong. Sorry, you shouldn't have pressed that. Like, you just need someone to be like, oh, okay, let's see what's going on here and how we can undo that, right? And that's, I don't know, it'll be interesting in terms of support where things go in that way.
Well, this is exactly the kind of insight that you provide, that is so essential to share, because a socio-emotionally intelligent technological support staff in the future we're embarking on, where, and this is again, this idea of technology is really good at certain things. When we talk about technology in education, we talk about it a lot in the academic sector around how it frees up instructors to be more human and have more human interactions.
Yeah.
So there are ways in the support sphere, it could be the same.
Yeah.
Yes, okay, live chat's good for certain things. Yes, automated responses of FAQs are great for a certain thing. A chatbot for FAQs is great for a certain thing.
Yeah.
But a human being, like I just called today, employment insurance, like the CRA, to understand more for a friend about how the system works. And I said to the lady, I was like, you answered all my questions. I was Googling, I couldn't find the answer.
Right.
And I talked to you. And in like 2 minutes, she answered my question. And she was so chuffed. On the other end of the line, she was like, you're like the most positive call I've had in like 3 weeks. So where is the human element of tech support?
Yeah.
And it is critical in these communication styles that we're talking about, in the channels by which humans can be reached in the support process, proactively before things happen versus reactively after you're frustrated and something doesn't work. All these things are essential considerations in building structures of tech support in the future of education.
And I think there's that, how do you conceptualize that brainstorming, right? The bouncing ideas of it. Here's what I'm trying to do, right? How do you do that in the future if that's purely AI driven? Again, maybe it is, but it's just like, well, have you considered this? What about this, right? What are you thinking you're going to do on this area? And so I think part of that is just being curious, right? There's a lot of curiosity that we need to bring, help me understand why you did it that way. And there's that trying to grasp, what their goals are. I mean, ultimately their goals are to use a piece of technology, but there's so much more behind that, right? And I think, even I get emails to this day from professors who are like, I remember when you helped me back, and and so to me that's wonderful, right? They remember that moment and that interaction, and it worked for them. Not to say there are 5 other times that it didn't, but
of course. But it builds that intrinsic motivation as well, where working with technology in education with this rapidly changing a landscape in terms of tools, functions, features as we exist in, requires a sense of perseverance, right? Like you could have a tool in your class right now and then it's outdated in 2 weeks, right? So we need to be building that intrinsic motivation for faculty members to be curious about how technology can support them. And if you, as a tech support provider, could help them through being curious as to their circumstances and setting, then we are passing, paying it forward as it is ultimately, hopefully ending at the student who we're developing a sense of curiosity as they move forward. It is incredible to me how much you're a teacher. Like you're talking about being curious, starting where someone is, communicating effectively, scaffolding from there. You're talking about a teaching and learning degree. And that's really, and the human element. And so it's a wonderful connection, because as you work for learning technology services in an educational environment, but the manner in which you're providing a service is teaching, is exemplifying the same things that they're trying to do. So you're modeling that kind of good practice around, okay, you matter. I'm here. I'm listening to you. You can't do that math question. In school, it would have looked like that. Okay, well, you can't do that. Well, let me try showing you this way. Like count on your hands. Like if I think of how I would approach it as a teacher, right? And then you get curious. Okay, well, why is that not working for you? Like how else might we teach you? Let's stand up. Let's use our bodies. Let's whatever.
It won't surprise you that I was gonna explore being a teacher.
Yeah. No, well, you already are. So you're doing
Well,
everything you
yeah,
have to do
yes,
the
sure.
certification for
Yeah,
it, obviously.
yeah, yeah.
Um, this is a really wonderful monologue on how to we talk a lot about changing education systems, preparing teachers and students for the future of education. We do not talk enough about how to prepare learning technology service departments for the future of teaching and learning and the support of technology enhanced teaching and learning. So I want to ask you a couple questions, and we'll start with some of the more like challenging ones, and then we'll end on the positive notes. But if you were to identify, other than the socio-emotional skill deficit, which I think is key and important, and a potential over dependence or over excitement on the use of AI for front facing customer service related questions, which we've talked about being potentially
Yeah.
troublesome. What are the main challenges that you would identify that you would suggest those who are working on future proofing tech support in large higher education institutions like the one you operate in? What should they be considering as some of the main challenges they should be addressing?
It's a great question. I think one of the biggest things that I struggle with is innovation a little bit, right? And operationalizing innovation. So, what do I mean by that? So, we want to meet faculty members where they're at. And as normal, there's some who are really excited about new technologies, and there are some who are okay with what we have. Um, the ones that get really excited and want to, you know, explore new things, inevitably what happens is they want to introduce those into our learning management system, which makes sense because that's, very easy for students to find them. And I think part of that is the balance of the support person is meeting them where they're at, but also future proofing, right? How do we operationalize this? So let's say we pop it into the learning management system and it doesn't work for that term, or it works for one instructor but not 10 others, or that tool isn't updated and they've built all of their core stuff around it. There's Or we pilot something and then we decide after a year that we're not going to continue with it. There's an expectation, I think, that once something is in in our learning management system, I mean, it's supported, it's there, and so then it's really hard to take it away if it's not working, right? It's also really hard to introduce something that doesn't have the best user experience because we live in a world where failure isn't seen as a success, right? Even if you tried something and we learned from it on paper, I mean, we can be all warm and fuzzy. We learned this and we shouldn't have done this, but on paper, that's a failure in the way that we're scoring these things, right? And so to have somebody try out something and it didn't work in the student's eyes, and everybody got a bad grade, or there's a bad course evaluation because what the heck was this tool and it didn't work, that doesn't allow us to innovate, right? We have to be stable, right?
Yeah.
We have to make sure, because there's grades involved, we have to make sure that our core is tight. And sometimes I think that's really hard to draw a box around. How do we continuously innovate and push the needle forward? Because that's also really hard to, as a support staff, here's your core things that we support, but people are trying this and this and this. Do we support them with that? We would love to, but we don't always necessarily have the time because it's not one of those core supported things.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm just to summarize, I feel like you've hit on three really important elements here in terms of, because I'm glad you didn't say, I mean, not that I'm glad, because it's true. If you say, well, we need more resources. Number one, learning technology services need more resources. That's a fact. It is a 100% provable fact across, I would assume, every institution that teaches and learns in this
Yeah.
country and abroad. So we would love to have more people. We'd love to have more time. We'd love to have more money. But if we were to focus our resources that we do have and look at how we are expending them, like I always say this, I always use this example of also I grew up in a house, where immigrant parents and both from a very meager socioeconomic background, we were always making more with less. We were always taught how to make more with less, how to, even just sewing our clothes or looking at how hand-me-downs and making use of things, recycling things and making use of things, or taking two things, putting them together, making a new thing. So I naturally think of this problem solving way like you do. And there's a great TED talk on time management where, because you hear this all the time, like, oh, I have no time, I have no time, I have no time. And then this woman wrote a book and she interviewed all these people about how they manage their time. And this woman was a very high flying CEO, said she had no time for anything. And then a pipe burst in her basement.
Right.
Well, she sure as heck had time to fix it, didn't she?
Yeah. Yeah.
Blocked things off. She made, she organized pickup for her kids from school, so on and so forth. So I do, it's probably a very unpopular opinion. I'm sure some people will have something to say about it. I always say you have time for what you make time for. So if there was a way in learning technology services and tech support that we could, from a directorial managerial standpoint, say to people that these are some things that are worth your time, that these are some things that we're going to measure your performance against, that this is what it means to succeed in this environment, I think we can make some differences. So you pointed out one, which is plug and play. This idea of technology coming out and what we operate with learning management systems, we have to be so conscious and considerate of plug and play features. How integrative are they? How effective are they in supporting what functions and features already exist and not just succumb to new trends, interesting, new flashy pieces of technology? I think that is a very important procedural consideration. What are the checks and balances that a Learning Technology Services Department could put in place to ensure we're not wasting so much time with things that don't work or things that don't play well with our plugs? Ha, sounds really weird. Two, this piece of performance evaluation. So not only for you as someone who works in the tech support side of things, but also for instructors. If you are someone who's there to help support them in a process of experimentation or innovation with technology, they have to be championed to do that work. And if they are only measured, if the quality of their performance is only measured by student perceptions, then we're letting down the instructor, and we're not promoting innovation in the way that we're talking about here. So performance evaluation, plug and play features. And then lastly, you were talking about change management. Like doing different stuff, new stuff for students and instructors in their courses with technology is disruptive. Like neurobiologically, we don't like it, right? Like we want to survive. And survival means predictability. So you operate in a world that is very unpredictable, and you're trying to provide through how you articulated your communication strategy and how you approach supporting, helping, teaching instructors in your tech support kind of personality. You're trying to provide stability. You're trying to provide, a rock in the ocean where it's like, I got you. I'm here for you. You're not alone. This is hard. This is challenging. Change management. How much is that something that people talk about? That idea of like the level of disruption and then the socio-emotional need for us to support how disruptive change is to our psyche.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And I think there's some element of that, not just, adding technologies, but taking them away too, right? We're always talking about adding, but at some point we got to kind of get rid of the ones that aren't necessarily the best technology. And I think, it's incredible to think about how flooded the market has become in terms of the tools that people, and I think that, there's more exposure to these tools, right? At conferences and, these companies are running
Yes.
huge marketing, and so they're getting in there, and sometimes it's really hard from a learning technology standpoint when there's been marketing done on a product, right? And and we have no say in that a little bit too, right? The sell has been made. And so at that point, we just, sometimes I just feel like I'm a bit of a block, right? I'm that, you know,
Naysayer.
oh, there's this thing, it's wonderful. And then I'm like, okay, well, in reality, we need to do security and privacy checks, and we need to make sure it's user friendly. And so I'm sure sometimes where, my role is to facilitate the use of learning technology, I'm sure sometimes people are really frustrated with me because I just can't push something forward, right? But again, I'm thinking holistically, right? What does that look like for the students? What does it look like in terms of security and privacy and maintainability, right? How long has this company been around, and what does their release of new things look like, and do we get any heads up about that, or is that just going to change? Because while the person who brought the tool to us, they may be fine with things just changing on the fly, someone else now who picks that up and is expecting this core stable product and it gets changed every 3 months, they may not be so happy about that. So it's trying to find this happy medium. And I think, Michelle, to come back to this cycle of communication, but before, communication is key, but before we communicate, we have some work to do to define in our institution, right? How do we push innovation forward? And what does that mean? And what would faculty expect from that? What would we expect from that? What would students expect from that? I feel like we need to kind of break a few molds right now and redefine that, because we won't be able to innovate if we don't.
Incredible. I kid you not, in the note I just made was the communication strategy. You literally full circle. How do companies communicate to institutions? How do institutions communicate to staff, support staff? How are staff communicating to instructors? How are instructors communicating to students?
Yeah. Yeah.
This cycle of communication around technology in teaching and learning, I don't even think it has a mold, Helen. I don't think it even
No.
has a mold to break. I
Yeah.
think we're just kind of ad hocking it at the moment.
No, I agree. And I think I'm particularly protective of the learning management system because, I'm sure there are instructors using tools all over the place that are not integrated with the learning management system. But as soon as it's integrated in the learning management system, it doesn't matter if the error is over here in the tool. If it doesn't work, it becomes a learning management system problem.
Yes.
And that just seems to be the way.
Amazing articulation of an important cycle of communication. Hopefully the kind of we always get the, well, there's not enough time, or we're always under pressure and these steps get missed, but intentional systems building is my vibe. And we are talking about key elements of a pillar in the system that I think we really do not pay enough attention to, and is a huge influencer on whether or not instructors are going to persevere, build intrinsic motivation, ultimately help support their students in being curious about technology, which is learning technology services. Let's wrap up, Helen, with a real positive one, because you have been from software engineering to whatever. I'm sure your first. What do you remember? What your first piece of technology was? Like, I can remember the yellow sports Walkman, the Sony yellow sports Walkman,
Oh,
and I remember being like, oh my God. I remember the first time I walked out in college. I was in university. I don't know. People are going to go now. They know how old I am. I walked out and I was like, I hear music and I'm not in my house. I remember so clearly being like, what? Portable music.
I remember my Walkman. It was pink and it was a fancy one because you didn't have to take the tape out and turn it over. It had a button to like flip the side.
Come
Yeah,
on.
I loved it. Yeah. I loved it.
So you've been privy to a lot of the innovations or the developments of
Yes.
technology. What excites you the most? And I'm going to narrow your focus in terms of teaching and learning. When you think of technology that can support teaching and learning, given the fact that we talk a lot about what the future of that should look like, and ironically or not, the some of the same things that you've talked about in terms of tech support exist there too, like socio-emotional learning, helping students take more ownership of their learning. We want them to engage and build essential skills outside of the specific content areas that they're learning in our courses. How do you think technology, or what technology really excites you about supporting the future of teaching and learning?
Um, Not to touch on like any particular technology, I think for me the thing, and we've been saying this for years and we still haven't figured it out, but I think in terms of personalized learning paths and helping students, often, still as students, and it doesn't matter how human and supportive any instructor is, as humans, we are reticent to say, I don't know that. I didn't understand that, especially if everybody else is nodding along and you're like, am I the only one? I think personalized learning is going to be game changing in that, if I don't understand a concept, nobody will know, right? I can just rewatch that 5 times, right? Instead of, imagining class, can you explain that in a different, no, I still don't get it. Sorry, everyone. Like, tell me that again, because I'm not understanding. I think personalized learning, I think, is huge, right? It allows us um, to figure out our own development area, right? We can identify that, or maybe it can identify it for you, right? And maybe it says, hey, we're thinking you're here. And so start here and let's go. And maybe you can go back and review. I think in terms of, as we look at opening up, well, there's so many areas. Oh my goodness. I'll be here forever. I
No,
think
but that's the
very,
perfect one
very,
too, because
I think,
that really connects to the other, that circles us all the way home, Helen, to the first thing that you said at the beginning, where we were having that discussion about what makes private school so special. What are we really
yes.
paying for?
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
paying for a personalized learning experience. That
Yeah.
ability for someone to get curious about who we are, challenge us, expose, provide
Yeah.
access to additional resources or
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
activities to challenge
Yeah.
us. There are ways now that technology can support that. And so you're identifying exactly what we said before, this kind of function or feature of what used to be really privileged educational environments. Can technology help to personalize a learning experience to an extent where I understand who I am better? I'm less stigmatized for the development pathway that I personally need to undertake in order to master these skills,
Yeah.
which will inevitably be different than
Yeah.
my peers.
Yeah.
And how can I reach success in my way, on my schedule, in the way that works
Yeah.
best for me? I think
And
that's a really, yeah.
I guess there's two other things. So I'm not going to touch on AI and virtual reality. Those are obvious game changers. They open up different worlds for people. They allow people to do things that they wouldn't necessarily be able to do. But I think too, the importance of technology giving us a wider breadth of social influence and different perspective, right? Go back to Vygotsky here. Like our knowledge is built from the social culture around us, and being able, even though I was in a private school, again, I was not exposed to other areas, right? And so what can I learn from different cultures, from different areas of knowledge, from different bodies of knowledge, right? I think that's huge. That also, if we talk about the zone of proximal development, it helps you have more experts available to tap into and help you build your knowledge. And then I think the other thing that I think has huge potential is in terms of inclusive learning, right? I think right now there's we still have so much work to do in terms of just providing content in a way that's accessible without someone having to raise their hand and say, I need this in a different format. Like, we should just be able to provide that by default so that, that's not a block for someone to be able to have access to the same content that everybody else does. And I think, you know, things are improving in that way, and there are definitely tools that will help with that. But I imagine that the potential of that to provide inclusive learning, it could be really powerful.
I couldn't agree more. And I know that we have a lot of work left to do, but it is an honor to be a colleague of yours and do the work that we are doing and dream about the things that we can accomplish with our limited resources. And you are definitely a source of support and intrinsic motivation for me. And I know that others listening to your incredible suggestions around how to support those who support others in a very digital teaching and learning space is going to be incredibly valuable to the work that they do. So thank you so much, Helen, for taking the time to chat today.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
The Education Revolution podcast is produced in-house by community members. And I'm your host, Dr. Michelle Sangara. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. And don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and head over to my website to opt in for my newsletter for more ways to connect with some of these big ideas.